It was a quiet night. The street was empty and the only sound was the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. John, a young man who lived alone in a small house at the edge of town, was sitting in his living room reading a book. The clock on the wall struck 10 and he stretched, feeling the calm of the night. Suddenly he heard a soft knock at the door. He frowned. Who could be visiting at this late hour? Slowly he got up and walked to the door. When he opened it, he saw a small girl standing there. She could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Her hair was messy and her clothes were torn. She looked scared, shivering in the cold night air. "Hello?" John asked softly. The girl did not answer. She just stared at him with large, strange eyes. They were not like normal human eyes. They were slightly glowing, with colors that changed depending on how the light hit them. John stepped back, unsure what to do. "Are you lost? Who are you?" he asked again. Still, the girl did not speak. Instead, she took a small step forward, holding out a tiny hand. There was something about her that made John's heart race. Something was not right. He looked around, but the street was empty. No parents, no neighbors, no one. Just this little girl standing on his doorstep. John felt a mix of fear and curiosity. He had to help her. "Okay," he said carefully. "Come inside. We'll figure this out." The girl hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the house. She moved quietly, almost like she was floating. John noticed that her footsteps made no sound on the wooden floor. He shivered but tried to stay calm. He led her to the living room and offered her a blanket. "Here, you must be cold," he said. She accepted the blanket without a word, wrapping it around herself. Then she looked at him with those strange glowing eyes again, studying him carefully. John sat down across from her. "Where are your parents? Do you know your way home?" he asked. The girl shook her head slowly. She did not speak, but she looked sad, lost, and maybe a little afraid. John felt a strange connection to her, like he had to protect her. "Don't worry. You're safe here," he said. As he watched her, he noticed other odd things. She seemed to understand things he did not say. When he walked around the room, she would sometimes move slightly, almost as if she could feel his presence even before he arrived. Her eyes would flicker in colors he could not describe, and once, he swore he saw a faint glow around her hands. John shook his head. Maybe he was imagining things. But something about this girl was definitely unusual. He had never seen anything like it in his life. Hours passed. The girl stayed quiet, huddled under the blanket. John tried to make her comfortable. He brought her a small cup of warm milk. She accepted it and drank carefully, still without saying a word. At some point, John noticed a small scar on her wrist. It looked like a symbol, not random but meaningful. He frowned. Where did she come from? What had happened to her? Suddenly he heard a sound outside the window. A soft, almost whispering sound, like the wind carrying words he could not understand. The girl stiffened and looked toward the window. Her eyes glowed brighter for a moment, then dimmed. She seemed afraid. John moved closer to her. "It's okay," he said, trying to comfort her. But she did not answer. She just stared at him, then at the window, then back at him again. He realized she was trying to tell him something, but he could not understand what. Night deepened. John decided she could not go back outside. The streets were empty and dangerous at this hour. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we will figure out what to do." The girl nodded slightly. Her eyes flickered with a soft light, almost like a small star. John felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea who she really was, but he knew this was no ordinary child. Before he went to bed, he glanced at her one last time. She was asleep, curled under the blanket, but even in sleep her eyes seemed to shimmer faintly, glowing like they had their own light. John lay awake for a long time that night. He kept thinking about the strange girl, the glowing eyes and the symbol on her wrist. He wondered where she came from. And a small, nervous part of him wondered, could she really be from another world? The night passed slowly, full of unanswered questions. One thing was certain. John's life was about to change forever. The mysterious arrival of the lost girl had begun a story that no one could have predicted, and somewhere in the darkness outside, someone or something was watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft light across John's living room. The small girl was already awake, sitting quietly on the sofa. She watched him carefully, her glowing eyes following his every move. John poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. "Good morning," he said gently. She nodded, a faint smile brushing her lips. It was the first time he had seen her show any emotion besides fear. He had named her Lyra, after a constellation he loved as a child. Lyra, however, had not responded to her name. She only looked at him, as if testing whether she could trust him. Over the next few days, John tried to learn more about her. But every time he asked simple questions, her age, where she came from, even her favorite color, Lyra only shook her head. Words did not seem to exist for her. She communicated in gestures, expressions, and sometimes strange sounds, almost musical but not human. John noticed other things too. Lyra did not eat like normal children. She nibbled on food, but she did not seem to need much. Sometimes she would stare at objects for a long time, her eyes glowing softly. He saw her touching small things, making them move slightly without even picking them up. At first he thought he was imagining it, but the movement was real. He saw a spoon tilt, a pen roll across the table. One afternoon, John tried to teach her to draw. He gave her a notebook and pencil, expecting scribbles. But Lyra drew perfect shapes, geometric patterns, and symbols he had never seen before. Some of the symbols seemed to shimmer faintly, almost like they carried their own light. John leaned closer, fascinated and frightened at the same time. "Where did you learn this?" he whispered. She only looked at him with those strange, knowing eyes. John realized something. Lyra was not like any child he had ever met. She had knowledge beyond her years, abilities he could not explain, and a quiet intelligence that sometimes made him feel small. At night, he would watch her sleep. Her body seemed fragile, but there were moments when he saw her hands glow softly. Sometimes she whispered in a language that sounded like music, soft and flowing, almost hypnotic. John could not understand the words, but he felt the emotion behind them: fear, sadness, and a longing for something he did not yet know. One evening, as a storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the sky, Lyra became restless. She moved to the window and pressed her hands against the glass. John went to her, concerned. "What is it?" he asked. Her eyes flickered brighter than ever before. Then, in a sudden motion, she pointed to the sky, then to herself, and finally to the stars. John froze. Was she trying to tell him she came from somewhere far away? Somewhere not on Earth? The thought sent chills down his spine. Could it be true? Could this small lost girl really be an alien, stranded here by accident or fate? The next day, John noticed something even stranger. Lyra reacted to electronic devices in a way that was unusual. When he turned on the television, she flinched, her eyes glowing, almost like she was in pain. Phones, radios, even small lights seemed to affect her differently. John realized she reacted to energy around her, and not just normal energy, something more. One night, John woke to a soft humming. Lyra was standing in the middle of the room, hands raised slightly. The air around her shimmered, and small objects lifted off the floor, spinning gently. John could not move, his heart racing. "Lyra, what are you?" he whispered, afraid of the answer. She looked at him, her eyes glowing, and for the first time she spoke a single word. Not in English, not in any language he recognized, but the sound was clear, strong, and filled with meaning. John did not understand the word, but he felt the weight of it, like a secret she had been keeping for a long time. Over the following days, John became both teacher and protector. He taught her small human things: how to eat properly, how to write her name, how to tie her shoes. But Lyra also taught him in ways he could not explain about strange patterns in nature, stars in the sky, and energy that seemed to flow through everything. John realized their bond was growing. He could not leave her, not when he was the only one who seemed to understand her. And yet a quiet fear stayed in his mind. If she truly was not from this world, then someone or something might come looking for her. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Lyra stood at the window again. She looked up at the stars, her small hand raised. John watched her, feeling a mix of awe and dread. Something was coming. He did not know what, but he could sense it in the way she trembled, in the quiet urgency in her gaze. John sat beside her and took her hand. It was warm, human, yet strangely different. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I will protect you." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time her glowing eyes seemed almost human. She nodded slightly, and in that moment John knew this was just the beginning. The real story, the story of where she came from and why she was here, was yet to unfold. Outside, the wind howled, carrying secrets from the universe, and somewhere far away, unseen, eyes were watching. waiting for the right moment to act. Days turned into weeks, and life in John's small house began to take a strange, new rhythm. Lyra, the mysterious girl with glowing eyes, was slowly becoming part of his daily world. Despite her silence and strange ways, a quiet bond was forming between them. In the mornings, John would make breakfast while Lyra sat at the table, watching him. She did not speak, but she had a way of observing that made him feel both nervous and fascinated. Sometimes she would mimic his movements perfectly, almost like a mirror. It was unsettling at first, but John started to see it as a playful game. One afternoon, John decided to take her to the nearby park. He wasn't sure how she would react to the world outside, but he felt she needed it. As soon as they stepped onto the grass, Lyra froze. The wind carried scents and sounds that seemed strange to her, and she looked around with wide, glowing eyes. Then, as if testing the limits of her new world, she ran. Not like a normal child, but swiftly, almost floating over the ground. John chased her, laughing, heart pounding. She stopped suddenly near a tree and looked back at him. For a moment, her glowing eyes seemed to sparkle with joy. "Good job," John said, catching his breath. "You're fast," she smiled faintly. It was a rare expression, but John felt a surge of warmth. Slowly, they began to share small moments of happiness together. Laughter, games, and quiet walks. He realized that despite all her strangeness, she craved connection, trust, and comfort. Back at home, the evenings were different. Lyra would often sit by the window, her hands pressed to the glass, looking at the stars. John would join her, silently watching the sky. He started noticing small gestures, how she leaned toward him when she felt safe, how her eyes flickered when she sensed something unseen. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Lyra finally spoke again. Her voice was soft, melodic, almost like a song. The words were not in any language John knew, but there was meaning in them. She was telling him something important, and he understood the emotion, if not the words. Fear, longing, and the desire to belong. John reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. It was a simple touch, but it bridged the gap between their worlds. She was not just a stranger from somewhere unknown. She was someone who needed him, just as much as he needed her. Over time, John noticed subtle things about her habits. She would sometimes touch objects and make them move slightly. Sometimes she would stare at the ceiling, murmuring softly as if listening to voices he could not hear. He realized these were not mere tricks. She had a connection to something beyond his understanding, something powerful. Yet, there was also innocence. Lyra loved small human things, drawing, tasting new foods, and watching the sunset. She would laugh softly when John made funny faces or when a bird landed nearby. Each day he felt that bond deepening, a mixture of wonder, responsibility, and affection. One evening, John noticed something odd. Lyra was staring at a photograph on the wall, a picture of his family from years ago. Her eyes glowed brighter than usual, and she pointed at the picture, then at herself. John froze. Was she trying to tell him something about belonging? About family? He knelt beside her. "You feel like you belong here?"
he asked gently.
She nodded slightly, and a small smile touched her lips. John felt a weight lift from his chest. He realized that despite her alien nature, she wanted connection, love, and trust, the same things every human craved. Days passed, and their bond grew stronger. John started leaving little notes for her around the house, simple drawings, instructions, or just messages of reassurance. She would respond in her own way, drawing patterns, leaving small gifts, or sometimes just sitting quietly, watching him with her glowing eyes. But even in these moments of peace, John sensed unease. There were times when Lyra would suddenly stiffen, her gaze fixed on some invisible point in the room. She would whisper softly in her strange language, and the air around her would shimmer faintly. It was a reminder. She was not fully of this world, and someone or something might come looking for her. One night, as John was reading, he heard her whisper again. This time he felt urgency in her voice. She pointed to the window, then to the sky, and finally back to herself. John realized that Lyra was trying to tell him something important. She wanted him to understand that her world, her past, and her origin were calling her. John felt a mix of fear and determination. He would protect her no matter what. But he also knew that their bond, as strong as it was, might soon be tested. Someone from her past could appear, someone with authority over her life, and he had no way to stop it. Still, for that night they sat together side by side, watching the stars. Lyra leaned slightly against him, a gesture of trust and connection. And for the first time, John felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could give her the life she had been searching for. A place where she could be safe, loved and understood, but in the shadows outside, unseen and silent, eyes watched, waiting. Waiting for the moment when the bond they had built would be challenged. Life in John's small house had settled into a fragile routine. Mornings were quiet, afternoons filled with small discoveries, and evenings spent gazing at the stars with Lyra. Yet, an uneasy feeling hung in the air, one John could not shake. Something was coming, something he could not see but he could feel. It began with small signs, a flicker of the lights in the living room, a hum, faint and strange like a melody carried on the wind. John thought it was the storm outside or the old wiring in the house, but Lyra did not seem fooled. Her glowing eyes would widen and she would look toward corners of the room he barely noticed. One evening, as John was preparing dinner, the phone on the counter rang. The display showed no number, just a blank screen. He hesitated, then picked it up. There was silence. Then a voice, soft and distorted, whispered a single word he could not understand. The line went dead. John's heart raced. He looked at Lyra. Her eyes were glowing brightly, almost painfully. She whispered something in her melodic alien language and then pointed toward the window. John felt a chill. Someone, or something, was reaching out to her. Over the next few days, strange occurrences increased. Notes appeared in unusual places, on the table, tucked between books, even inside the fridge. They were not written in any human language John had ever seen. Symbols, curves, and lines that seemed to shimmer faintly under the light. Lyra would examine each one carefully, tracing the symbols with her fingers. Her eyes would glow in patterns as if responding to the messages. Sometimes she would hum softly, her voice matching the rhythm of the strange symbols. John realized she understood these messages in a way he could not. One night, John woke to a soft knocking at the back door. He approached quietly, careful not to startle her. Lyra was already awake, standing near the window, glowing softly. The knocking stopped as he reached the door. But in its place, a small silver device appeared on the doorstep. It was unlike anything John had seen, smooth, metallic, shaped like a small orb. He picked it up, feeling a slight vibration under his fingers. Lyra reached for it immediately. The moment her hands touched the device, it floated into the air and projected holographic symbols around the room. John's eyes widened. The symbols seemed to tell a story, an alien story he could not comprehend. Lyra's glowing eyes flickered rapidly as she pointed to different parts of the projection. It was clear she was trying to communicate something urgent. The messages, their warnings, John whispered to himself. He had no proof, but he could feel the urgency. Someone from her past or her world was trying to reach her. And now, that someone was closer than ever. The next day, strange things started happening outside the house. Shadows moved at odd angles, and lights in the distance flickered like Morse code. Lyra became restless, pacing the living room, her eyes darting toward every window and corner. She whispered fragments of her language, and John began to realize that these were not just messages. They were instructions, clues and warnings all at once. He tried to decode them, but the symbols defied logic. They shifted, changed, and glimmered in ways that made no sense to a human mind. He could only watch as Lyra traced the symbols with her fingers, her glowing eyes following their every movement. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra pointed toward the sky and then to John. Her expression was urgent. She seemed to be saying, "Prepare. Something is coming. Protect me." John's heart pounded. He had promised to protect her, but he was not prepared for this. Whatever force was sending these messages, it was powerful, intelligent, and relentless. And he feared that when it arrived, it would demand more than he could give. That night, he sat beside her, holding her small, warm hand. "I don't know what's coming," he whispered, "but I will protect you, no matter what." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes glowing softly, and for a moment they shared understanding beyond words. She trusted him, and he trusted her. But the shadows outside grew darker, and the messages kept coming, more urgent, more demanding, and impossible to ignore. John realized their peaceful days were over. The strange alien signals had broken through their quiet life. Something or someone from Lyra's past was reaching into their world, And soon he knew they would arrive in person. As the wind howled outside and the house seemed to hum with unseen energy, John clenched his fists. He would not let her go. Not now, not ever. And as he looked at Lyra, standing quietly with her glowing eyes fixed on the sky, he felt a mix of fear, wonder, and determination. This was no longer just about caring for a lost girl. It was about survival, secrets, and a truth far bigger than John had ever imagined. And in the shadows beyond the limits of human understanding, eyes watched. Waiting for the right moment, the message was clear. Something was coming. And when it arrived, their world would change forever. The storm from the previous night had passed, leaving the world outside wet and silent. John was sitting in the living room trying to keep calm, but the events of the last few days had left him uneasy. Lyra sat quietly beside him, her glowing eyes flickering occasionally as if sensing something he could not. Then there was a knock at the door, slow, deliberate, and firm. John froze. A visitor at this hour? His heart raced. "Lyra, stay here," he whispered, more to steady himself than to instruct her. He walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Standing there was a woman. She was tall and graceful with an air of quiet authority. Her hair shimmered strangely, almost as if it caught light differently than normal. Her eyes, piercing and intense, locked on the door. There was something otherworldly about her. John felt a chill run down his spine. He opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman smiled faintly. "I believe you have something that belongs to me," she said, her voice calm but commanding. Every word seemed to echo slightly as if it carried weight beyond normal conversation. John stepped back. I'm not sure what you mean." Her gaze shifted, and it fell on Lyra. The girl's eyes glowed brightly and she shrank back slightly. John realized immediately this woman was not ordinary. She was here for Lyra. "I am her mother," the woman said, "and she belongs with me." John's mind spun. He had known Lyra was not from this world, but to hear it confirmed so plainly and so close made his chest tighten. He glanced at Lyra, who was now hiding slightly behind him, eyes wide and fearful. "I don't know what you mean," John said again, but his voice wavered. The woman stepped closer, calm but unyielding. "She is my daughter. You have cared for her, yes, but she must return with me. It is her fate. Her world needs her." John felt a surge of protectiveness. "She's safe here. She trusts me." "You can't just take her." The woman's eyes softened slightly, but there was no backing down. "It is not your choice," she said gently, "but it is hers. If she wishes to stay, she must speak it." Lyra's small hand emerged from behind John. She stepped forward slowly, glowing eyes fixed on the visitor. John held his breath. The woman knelt slightly to meet her gaze.
"Do you remember me, child?"
she asked softly. Lyra's eyes flickered, her glowing patterns shifting like stars moving in the night sky. She whispered something in her alien language. The visitor nodded, understanding every word. "She remembers," the woman said, "but she is torn. You have given her a life here. A life of choice and love." John's heart ached. He had grown to love her as his own, even though he knew the truth, that she was not human and she belonged to a world he could not enter. Yet he could not let her go without knowing her choice. The woman extended her hand toward Lyra. "The decision is yours. Come with me or stay with him. But choose carefully. Both paths will change you forever." Lyra looked at John. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever, filled with emotion. She reached for his hand first, then looked back at the visitor. For a long moment she said nothing. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air around them, a vibration John could almost feel. Finally, she spoke, not in words John understood, but in a soft, melodic tone that carried weight and meaning. John felt her intention, her voice reaching his heart. She wanted to stay, at least for now. The visitor's eyes softened, but a faint sadness lingered. "Very well," she said. "She may remain. But know this, she cannot hide from her world forever. When the time comes, she must answer the call." Lyra's eyes flickered, glowing with relief and hope. She stepped closer to John, resting her small hand in his. For the first time he felt a sense of victory, but also an underlying fear. They had won the moment, but the visitor's warning was clear. The storm was far from over. Before leaving, the woman placed a small device on the floor. It pulsed faintly with light. "This will guide you if danger comes," she said, "and it will remind you that she belongs to more than one world." With that, she rose, turned, and disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the device and a lingering sense of awe. John picked up the orb carefully, examining its strange, glowing patterns. Lyra looked up at him, glowing softly. She whispered something in her alien language, and John could sense gratitude, trust, and a quiet promise. They were together for now. That night, as they sat together watching the stars, John realized something important. Their bond had been tested, and it had survived. But the universe was vast, and there were forces beyond his understanding that would not rest. Outside, the wind carried faint whispers. Shadows moved in the corners of the world, and somewhere unseen eyes were watching. The visitor had left, but her presence lingered like a reminder. Lyra's past was not done with her, and one day it would return. John squeezed Lyra's hand. "We'll face it together," he whispered. And for the first time in days, he felt a spark of hope. They had survived the visitor's test, but deep down he knew the real challenges were just beginning. The morning sun broke through the curtains, but John could not feel its warmth. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small device the visitor had left behind. It pulsed faintly, glowing like a heartbeat. Lyra sat nearby, quietly tracing the light patterns with her fingers. Her eyes flickered in soft shades, reflecting her unease. The night with the visitor had changed everything. John had always thought protecting Lyra meant keeping her close. But now he realized the truth. Her world was calling her, and he had no way to stop it. The thought gnawed at him. He loved her as his own, yet he could not ignore the warnings, the alien signals, and the knowledge that she was not fully of this world. Lyra sensed his conflict. She reached for his hand, small and fragile, yet firm. John looked at her glowing eyes, and for a moment he saw both hope and fear reflected there. He knew she trusted him, but she was also aware of her other life, a life he could not touch. For days, John wrestled with his conscience. Every choice seemed impossible. If he forced her to stay, would he be taking away a part of her true self? If he let her go, could he bear the thought of losing her? And yet Lyra had not asked to leave. She had stayed, at least for now, by her own decision. One afternoon, John tried to talk to her. "Lyra," he said gently, "do you want to stay here? Or go with her?" Lyra looked up at him. Her glowing eyes pulsed softly. She whispered in her melodic alien language. He could not understand the words, but he felt the meaning. She was torn, unsure, and frightened. Her emotions were raw, mixing loyalty, fear, and curiosity. John realized that he could not decide for her. He could guide, protect, and advise, but the choice was hers. That thought both comforted and terrified him. He had never faced a decision so important, one that would shape both their lives forever. That evening, the device from the visitor pulsed suddenly, projecting faint holographic symbols into the room. Lyra's eyes widened. She reached for the light, tracing the patterns, murmuring in her language. John watched her carefully. It seemed the messages were not just instructions, they were temptations, reminders of where she truly belonged. He saw the conflict in her. On one hand, she had found safety and trust with him. On the other, her instincts, memories, and perhaps her destiny pulled her toward the woman from her world. John realized that letting her choose was the only way to honor her, even if it meant heartbreak. For hours, he stayed with her, holding her hand, offering quiet comfort. Lyra did not move far from him, but she also kept glancing at the device. John understood that the decision was building, growing heavier with every passing moment. The next morning, John tried a different approach. He sat Lyra on the sofa, keeping his tone calm. "No matter what you choose," he said, "I will respect it. I will protect you. But you must be honest with yourself. Do you want to stay or go?" Lyra's glowing eyes flickered in patterns John could not decipher. Then she stood, moving to the window. She looked at the sky, the stars shining faintly in the morning light. She whispered again, her voice a soft song. John felt her thoughts in fragments: love, fear, loyalty, curiosity, and a deep yearning for something beyond this world. It was then that he realized the truth. Lyra did not need him to decide for her. She needed him to trust her decision, whatever it might be. His role was not to hold her back, but to support her, to be a safe place she could return to if she chose this life over the other. John exhaled slowly. "I trust you," he said, his voice steady. "Whatever you choose, I will be here." For a long moment, Lyra stood silently, glowing softly, as if weighing the invisible scales of her life. Then she looked at him. Her eyes pulsed with a steady light, and for the first time John sensed clarity in her choice. She would stay for now. But he also knew the visitor's warning was not empty words. Someone or something would come again. Lyra's past could not be ignored, and one day she might have to leave. John felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of relief and fear. The conflict was not over. It had only paused. That night they sat together in the living room side by side, the small device casting soft light around them. Lyra rested her head on John's shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort. For now, the decision had been made. But John knew deep down that the universe was vast, and forces beyond their understanding were still in motion. Outside, shadows shifted and the wind whispered secrets. The visitor's presence lingered like a shadow over their lives. John squeezed Lyra's hand, silently promising that he would be ready for whatever came next. And in that quiet, tense moment, both of them understood. Their bond was strong, but the real challenge, the one that would test their courage, loyalty and love, was yet to come. The night was quiet, but John could feel tension in the air. Lyra sat by the window, her glowing eyes scanning the sky as if expecting something. The small device the visitor had left pulsed softly, like a heartbeat, illuminating the room in gentle, shifting patterns. For days they had lived in a fragile calm, the conflict of choice behind them, yet the threat of her past lingering nearby. John had promised to protect her, to respect her decision, but he could not shake the feeling that something was coming. Then, without warning, a sound echoed outside, a low hum, different from the wind, mechanical yet alive. Lyra stiffened. Her eyes flared brighter, casting soft light across the walls. John moved beside her, heart pounding, knowing instinctively that the visitor, or something far more powerful, was back. The doorbell rang, sharp and deliberate. John froze. He opened the door cautiously, and there she was, the woman from before. But this time her presence was more commanding. She carried herself with authority, yet there was a hint of something emotional beneath the control. Concern, maybe even fear for Lyra. She has chosen, John said quietly, standing protectively in front of Lyra. The woman's eyes softened slightly, then narrowed. I know, but the universe does not forget, and her path cannot be denied forever. Lyra stepped forward, glowing faintly, and John felt a mixture of awe and fear. She spoke in her melodic language, words carrying clarity and purpose. John could not understand the language fully, but he felt her meaning. I have a choice. I am ready. The visitor knelt to Lyra's level. You may stay for now, but the moment will come when you must decide. You cannot hide from your destiny. Lyra's small hand reached out toward John, then hesitated. She looked at the visitor, then back at him. Her glowing eyes shifted through colors, deep blue, soft pink, and bright white, each shade reflecting emotion, trust, love, and courage. John felt a lump in his throat. She was choosing, not being chosen. I trust you, John whispered, squeezing her hand. The visitor studied them both, her gaze piercing yet gentle. Your bond is strong, she said. Stronger than I anticipated. Very well, there is a way for her to live in both worlds, but it will require strength, courage, and sacrifice. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. John tilted his head, puzzled. The visitor extended her hand, revealing a small crystalline device. It shimmered with light that seemed alive. This will allow her to travel between worlds safely, the visitor explained. She can learn, explore, and still return to the one she loves. But remember, this path is not easy. It will test both of you. Lyra reached out and touched the crystal. Light pulsed through the room, soft but intense. John felt warmth spread through him, a mixture of relief and awe. She was not leaving him, not entirely. She was choosing a life that embraced both her worlds, and he would be part of it. For the first time in weeks, John allowed himself to breathe. He looked at Lyra, her glowing eyes steady now, filled with determination. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried both promise and courage. Then the unexpected happened. The visitor's gaze shifted to the window. Shadows moved across the sky, not from clouds, but from something alive, something immense. John's heart skipped a beat. Your world will come looking, the visitor said softly. Not everyone will understand your choices, Lyra. Be ready. Lyra nodded, her eyes flickering with light that seemed to respond to the shadows above. John realized that this was just the beginning of her journey. She would live in both worlds, but both worlds carried danger, responsibility, and secrets he could not fully comprehend. The visitor rose and placed the crystal device carefully in Lyra's hand. "Remember, the choice is yours, and you are never alone." With that, she stepped back, and in a shimmer of light, she vanished into the night. John held Lyra's hand tightly. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, voice steady but filled with emotion. Lyra looked up at him. Her glowing eyes softened to a calm, steady blue. She whispered in her language, a tone John felt deep in his chest. "Yes. Together." The room seemed to pulse with life, the crystal device glowing softly, casting patterns across the walls. Outside, the shadows lingered, watching, waiting. But inside, there was warmth, hope, and the strength of a bond that could survive any challenge. John realized something important. Life with Lyra would never be simple. Her world was vast, filled with unknowns, mysteries, and threats he could not predict. But for the first time, he knew that they could face it together. Their bond was no longer just about protection. It was about trust, courage, and love that transcended worlds. As they stood by the window looking at the stars, John felt a mixture of fear and wonder. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but for now he and Lyra had chosen each other. And that choice, he knew, was stronger than anything the universe could throw at them. The wind whispered through the trees outside, carrying secrets and promises. And in the quiet glow of the room, John understood the truth. Their story was far from over. It was only just beginning.